John McCain's view of foreign policy and its antecedents in the views of Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, and Franklin Roosevelt are grievously, devastatingly wrong. What is the alternative? It is the non-interventionist foreign policy advocated by the American founders, the policy of peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none, in the words of Jefferson. Further implications of this kind of foreign policy were stated by Richard Cobden, a 19th century British classical political economist, free trade activist, and a great man who achieved the repeal of the British Corn Laws. He offers eloquent words on the proper foreign policy and its effects. Cobden wrote, "The progress of freedom depends more upon the maintenance of peace, the spread of trade, and the diffusion of education than upon the labors of cabinets and foreign ministers." He further wrote that peace will come to earth when the people have more to do with each other and governments less. So for all of you who are worried about national security, worried about another terrorist attack, worried about international hostilities, remember Cobden's words. When people have more to do with each other and governments less, there will be more peace. The more governments stay out of foreign policy, the less they intervene, the more chances people have to interact with one another peacefully. Cobden said that England, by calmly directing her undivided energies to the purifying of her own internal institutions, to the emancipation of her commerce, would, by thus serving as it were for the beacon for other nations, aid more effectually the cause of political progression all over the continent than she could possibly do by plunging herself into the strife of European war. And it worked, until 1914, of course, when England entangled herself in the ultimate devastation of World War I. But fighting a war, occupying a foreign country, embroiling oneself in very difficult and bloody conflicts is not the way to achieve peace. The way to achieve peace is to lead by example, to have a free society where individual rights are respected, where commerce is valued, where culture is valued, and where these are spread to the remainder of the world through peaceful interactions, through suggestions and examples and urgings that other countries follow the same path, but not through violence. Cobden said, "I have been accused of looking too much to material interests. I believe that the physical gain will be the smallest gain to humanity from the success of this principle. I look farther. I see in the free trade principle that which shall act on the moral world as the principle of gravitation in the universe, drawing men together, thrusting aside the antagonism of race and creed and language, and uniting us in the bonds of eternal peace. I believe that the effect will be to change the face of the world so as to introduce a system of government entirely distinct from that which now prevails. I believe that the desire and the motive for large and mighty armies, for gigantic empires and great navies will die away. I believe that such things will cease to be necessary or to be used when man becomes one family and freely exchanges the fruits of his labor with his brother man. I believe that the speculative philosopher of 1,000 years hence will date the greatest revolution that ever happened in the world's history from the triumph of the principle which we have met here to advocate. What is that principle that will bring about peace and security and prosperity to all? It is precisely that commercialism which John McCain and Theodore Roosevelt so fervently decry. This commercialism, this expansion of trade, and peaceful interaction is the solution to virtually all of the United States foreign policy problems today. Consider, the more people have an opportunity to peacefully interact with one another, to exchange goods and services, the more opportunities people have to find out good things about one another, things to like. Not just things to hate, not just things for which they would be willing to bash in the other person's head. Because military propaganda during the time of war often incites that kind of hate. Even in so-called free countries such as the United States, war propaganda had that impact, considering how Germans were perceived during both World Wars, how the Japanese were perceived during World War II, and in many circles how Arabs are perceived today. And instead of hating these people, I believe that all Americans should attempt to find what is the best about them, and try to benefit from that through trade, through peaceful exchange. And furthermore, when many people who are currently living in unfree societies see the benefits of trade of the United States with everyone, including Cuba, Iran, and North Korea, when they see these benefits, they will begin to accept Western lifestyles and Western ways of thinking. And their current oppressive regimes, which do pose a threat to security today, will become intolerable to them, and they will throw them off. And the United States will not need to expend a single drop of blood to achieve this. It can be achieved quite peacefully, quite sanely and rationally, gradually. But I believe that if this principle is implemented, Islamic fundamentalism will disappear within 20 years. In the Middle East, virtually everybody will recognize that the United States is not out to get them. That indeed American prosperity, American freedoms, can be exercised by all human beings, provided that this prosperity and these freedoms are communicated through peaceful interaction. John McCain does not get this. John McCain has explicitly admitted on many occasions that he is completely economically ignorant, that he doesn't know anything about economics or its relationship to human affairs. Do we want this man as president? This man who would have us bomb Iran as a foreign policy solution? This man who would spend 100 years in Iraq? This man who continually preaches sacrifice, hardship, and war as virtues? I do not believe that the United States can withstand such a president, and therefore I urge you to think very carefully about whom you support this year during the election.